Welcome back to the second part of a fanfiction reading of Blake X Yang, You Belong With Me. Starting with chapter 4, let's go. Blake's POV. I walked out of the lunchroom, and as I walked, I noticed my cheeks were feeling warm. I was blushing. I tried to stop blushing, but I couldn't. I talked to Yang. It didn't seem like it would be a big deal, but to me it was. I couldn't let her know how I felt. She just judged me. I walked into class covering my blushing face with my books, and without looking at anything or anyone, I walked to the back and took my seat. The teacher, like all of the teachers on the first day of school, started to take attendance, and my name was the third one called. I shouted here and tried to focus on the words of my book. As the teacher went on with the lesson, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed some bright blonde hair and frowned, sighing a bit. I tried to cover my entire face and shield myself from her view. She was everywhere. After class, I hurried out as fast as... She's everywhere. After class, I hurried out as fast as I could and hoped to get to my last class of the day without being seen or being in the same class as her. I did like her a lot, but after having half of my classes with her, it's kind of getting old. I walked to my next class. I noticed Yang's POV. Sorry. I noticed Blake in class, but decided to not talk to her. I talked to her a little bit too much today. I walked, or rather ran, to my next class, determined not to be late. If Blake was in that class too, I wouldn't be surprised by much. I walked in wanting to just relax and sat down in the front. I kept my eyes on the teacher the whole time she talked and was pretending to take notes, when in reality I was writing hearts around Blake's name. If anyone ever found out. I tried to push the thought out of my head, and my cheeks turned slightly pink. I then focused my gaze upward and closed my notebook. I listened to the teacher for the rest of the hour, and before I knew it, the school day was over. I walked out to the bus and plopped down in a seat and headed home. When I got home, I put my backpack against the wall and started on my homework. There was a lot to do, and I had to get started if I wanted to finish. Blake's POV. As I walked home from the bus that day, I realized just how much homework I had. As I walked in, my mom came down the stairs. "Hey, honey, how was school?" she asked with a smile as usual. I smiled back and replied, "It was good," and then, to my surprise, I blushed. My mom saw my blushing and smiles. "Why are you blushing?" she asked me. I blushed more and scratched the back of my head nervously. "I'm not blushing," I argued with a small smile. She nods her head. "Uh-huh." "Well, dinner will be ready soon," she says as she walks down the stairs and into the kitchen. I walked up to my room and started on my homework. Yang's POV. I woke up the next morning asleep at my desk. I must have drifted off. I finished my homework really quick and went downstairs for breakfast. When I got downstairs, I smiled, seeing RWBY already at the table. "What's up with you? You're never up this early." I looked at the time, 6:30 a.m. "I got up and couldn't fall back asleep," she said tiredly. I smiled and sat down at the table across from her. Across from her. I poured myself a bowl of cereal and started to eat. Once finished, I got up and went to go get dressed. I came out and smiled. RWBY smiled as she went to get ready for school as well. Once she's done, I grabbed my backpack and headed out the door, RWBY following behind me. We waited at the bus stop. Blake's POV. As I waited on the bus, I realized the next stop was Yang's. I hid my face in my book and put my backpack next to me nervously. Yang walked onto the bus and sat down in the seat across from me. I stayed quiet, face in my book, hoping she wouldn't talk to me because I'd get nervous. I could see her looking at me through the corner of my eye and smiled. Secretly, I was smiling at her, but she would think I was smiling at my book. She smiles back. As I looked up from my book, I realized that we were at school. I'd gotten through a good chunk of my book. I grabbed my things and headed off the bus to my first class. Days, weeks, months passed by, and as I sat in class, the announcement came on. They said that there was a school dance coming up. I immediately thought of Yang, but then quickly realized she'd never say yes. It would probably be pretty weird to get asked to a dance by another girl. Although I could play it off that I wanted to go as friends, I quickly put the thought out of my mind, or at least I tried to. I was in the middle of a daydream when I heard the lunch bell. I grabbed my things and made my way to the cafeteria. After hearing the lunch bell, I smiled. I hadn't eaten in a while, and I was getting hungry. I saw Blake at her usual table, in the same seat, and reading the same book. I smiled as I got my lunch. I sat down at the table at the other end of the room. I secretly started to write hearts around her name again. I didn't notice anyone was behind me until I felt a tap on my shoulder and a familiar voice. Ruby. I panicked and shut my notebook quickly, my only hope being that she hadn't seen much and just walked up. She smiled as I turned around to face her. She had a wide and mischievous smile on her face, and by looking at her, I'd known she'd saw the drawing. You like Blake, she says loudly with a smile. I pull her down and cover her mouth in the middle of her sentence. No, I don't, I said in a serious tone. I saw it. There's no reason to hide it, she says as she smiles more. I shook my head as she continued smiling. I drag her out by her red hoodie and pull her to the empty hallway outside the lunchroom. Come on, Yang, she says happily. Ask her to the dance. I blush and look down. I can't, I say to her, and I'm not lying. If I told her how I felt, she wouldn't want to talk to me ever again. We're both girls, after all. As I walked home from school that day, too nervous to ride the bus, all I could think about was her. Okay. Blake's POV. The minute I heard the announcement about the school dance, I knew I wanted to ask Yang. I mean, sure, we were both girls, and sure, she might reject me, but it was a risk I was willing to take. I smiled and walked into my house again after the long school day. I walked to my room. I sat down on my bed looking in my backpack to see if I had any homework. Surprisingly enough, I didn't. I usually got homework every day, but I guess not today. I shrugged and pulled out my book as I laid back. I opened up the page bookmarked and began to read. Yang's POV. As I walked down the sidewalk heading home, I saw Ruby. Oh my goodness. I saw Ruby walking alone ahead of me. I picked up my pace and ran up to her and smiled. She returned the smile, seeing me. Hey, Ruby. Hey, Yang. Why aren't you riding the bus? Why aren't you? I started to blush as I thought of Blake and I looked away. It's nothing. Oh, okay, well, I'm not riding the bus because I missed the bus. Why Ruby was ahead of Yang on that walk, I don't know, but whatever. I smiled and nodded as I looked at my sister staying silent. As we walked together, it became quiet. We didn't talk anymore for the rest of the walk and went to walk home, and when we both walked in the door, we parted ways to do our own things. I smiled as I turned on my phone and looked for any new texts or calls. None, I sighed, turning it off as the light disappeared, and I fell back onto the mattress. I sat back up and stood to get dressed into more comfortable clothes. As I pulled out my backpack looking for any homework assignments, I found a math sheet, so I took it out and searched for a pencil. Couldn't find any. I went downstairs to ask Ruby if she had one I could borrow. I walked down the stairs and sighed as I called out Ruby's name. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, I recognized a lock of black hair and blushed heavily. Blake. I took a deep breath and walked over to Ruby, hoping to not embarrass myself in front of Blake. I asked her for a pencil, and she says she has one and is appearing from the room to go get it. Me and Blake were alone. I smiled and waved at Blake, hoping not to embarrass myself. She smiled, waving back, and silence took over. The silence was finally broken by Ruby and with a pencil, with my ticket out of the awkward situation. I sighed and took the pencil as I ran back up the stairs and took shelter in my room once more. I sighed in relief as my door closed with a click. I went over to my desk and started my homework. Blake's POV. When I saw Yang come down the stairs, I have to admit I was surprised. I didn't know Ruby and Yang were related, besides for the fact that she told you that she was her sister. Besides the fact that Yang told Blake that Ruby was her sister at the beginning, but authors forget. Inconsistency. It happens all the time. They had different last names. I guess they could be half-sisters or something, but it wasn't any of my business, so I pushed the thoughts to the back of my mind and walked into their kitchen, my textbook in hand. I sighed and looked around for Ruby, not seeing her anywhere. I sat down and put my backpack over the shoulders of the chair, opening my textbook to the page we needed to complete the assignment. I opened my folder and took out our packet and a pencil. I read the first question. It said, "When was dust discovered?" I sighed and started to look through my book for the answers, skimming through the paragraphs, trying to find where it talked about dust. As I looked through what seemed like an endless sea of words, Ruby entered the room again with a smile, sitting down across from me. "So, what's the first question?" she asked, seeming eager as me to finish the assignment. The thought of Yang upstairs as a series of footsteps above me, or just a series of footsteps above me, caused butterflies in my stomach, as well as a light blush across my cheeks. "It says, when was dust discovered?" I tell her. She seemed to notice my blush as she then asked me, "Hey Blake, why are you blushing?" I hide my face in my book, praying for my blush to go away. "I'm not blushing," I tell her, sternly, hoping she'd drop the whole thing. Ruby nods a bit, not seeming to be convinced, but deciding not to pry as she looks back at her textbook, trying to find the answer. I take a deep breath and stand putting my book down quickly. "Where's your bathroom?" I ask, softly, with a hint of nervousness in my voice. "Up the stairs and to the left," she tells me, smiling as she looked down at her book still. I nod and walk out of the kitchen, heading towards the stairs. As I walk, I can feel myself blushing still and decided to quicken my pace, hoping nobody would see me. As I got into the bathroom, I quickly closed the door and locked it, sighing relief. I slid down against the door until I was sitting against it, blushing heavily now as I thought of Yang. I looked at myself in the mirror. I started to think of the dance. I wanted to ask her to the dance more than anything, but the question remained in my mind. What if she didn't feel the same way? I sighed and looked down into the sink before turning on some cold water. I sighed and splashed my face a few times. Maybe I was being selfish, crazy. I didn't know for sure into the back of my mind as I took a deep breath, wiping my face with a nearby hand towel before unlocking the door and stepping out of the hall. I didn't look up, and as a result, bumped into Yang, who was also walking downstairs. I blushed heavily and didn't look up for a few seconds. When I finally looked up, Yang was standing over me, smiling as she offered a hand to help me up. I took it and smiled softly back as I pulled myself up, or something. Ugh. Dumb ads. I've already seen this ad, which is just the more disappointing thing. Wow. Okay. It's just an author's note. I'm not going to worry about that. Chapter 6. Yang's POV. I smiled as I helped up Blake. Her bangs fell over her eyes as she looked up, causing me to blush. I looked down, hoping she wouldn't see. I peeked up a little bit, and she was blushing too. Was it possible? Did Blake have a crush on me too? Right now, it didn't matter, because if the silence carried on any longer, she'd think I didn't want to talk to her, even though it was totally the opposite. "So, Blake," I said, awkwardly and nervously trying to start the conversation up. She looked up at her, her hand gently rubbing the back of her neck nervously as I smiled at her, unsure of what to say. "Yeah?" she asked softly and shyly. Like Blake. "What are you doing here?" I asked, the smile still plastered across my face, as well as a slight blush that didn't want to leave. Me and Ruby were partnered up in class for an assignment and didn't finish it in class. She says, a small smile at the corners of her lips. I smiled as I saw her smile at me, the blush darkening slowly as I stared at her, noticing every detail of her beautiful face, porcelain and smooth. I nod and smile. Well, then I'll let you get back to it." I smile and turn to leave. I barely hear her as she speaks up again. "Yang?" she asks shyly, seeming to have a question on her mind. I turn around, looking a little bit confused. In the back of my mind, I can't help wondering if she's about to ask me to the dance. I smile and blush at the thought, hoping it to be true. "Yes?" I ask as calmly and casually as I can, hoping not to sound too nervous. Her blush darkens as she starts to speak. I smile a little more, trying to refrain at the off chance I would be wrong about her asking me to dance. "Would you..." Deep breaths here. Would you like to go to the dance? She blurts out, her knees shaking. She speaks, clearly nervous. Chapter 8. So, in case you didn't notice that one there, they decided to skip a chapter number, so it went from chapter 6 to chapter 8. Yeah. The chapter doesn't exist. Don't worry, nothing actually is missed. Anyways, Blake's POV. I did it, I thought. I actually asked her. I smiled a bit as I looked down at the floor, but as quickly as I felt that pang of relief, a bigger pang of panic washed over me. I asked her to the dance. God, I'm so stupid. I just ruined any chance I had of actually getting to know her. I blushed heavily, my knees shaking again, just as they started to calm down. I peeked up at her from the small window between my tangled black hair, her face plastered with a look of surprise, shock, fear. I sighed and stood up straight after what felt like an eternity of waiting and spoke up. I should go. Sorry to waste your time, I say softly. Even I can hear the hurt in my voice, the sadness of being rejected. I sigh again and turn to walk away, my head hung low, staring at the carpeted pattern on the ground. As I start to walk away, I felt a hand brush against my wrist, and in a matter of seconds her fingers were wrapped around my wrist. She was squeezing my wrist and pulling me back, looking like she wanted to say something. I felt the smallest hint of hope that she'd say yes, that she might tell me how she feels, if she even felt that way. I stop in my tracks and pull my head up to look at her, smiling a bit at the corner of my small lips. Yang's POV. As I stared down at the black beauty, gripping her wrist with my small hands, I realized just how much I want to say yes. This could be a start to a future relationship between me and her, which is more than I deserve at this point. I could see the hurt look on her face as I stood speechless. I looked down again, feeling completely guilty about making her feel bad, about finally speaking up about something we both want more than anything. Hope she feels that way at least. Or I hope she feels that way at least. I sigh and look up again. What if it doesn't work out? What then? Will we ever speak again after this? But on the other hand, what if it does? I don't know what to do right now. All I want to do is tell her yes, that I'd go with her and kiss her, punching her beautiful silky black hair in my hands and kiss her like there's no tomorrow. But what if she means she wants to go as friends? I stand up straight, hoping to look more confident than ever as I speak. Yes, I smile softly and blush heavily without realizing it. Ugh. And even though that really wasn't that much in terms of, like, yeah. Even though we didn't really read that much, I think we can stop it here. Maybe we can try to get the rest of it done in the next, yeah, maybe I can try to get it done in the next episode. But yeah, that'll be it for this one. Next time, we'll try to finish the rest of it. If not, we may end up having 4 parts of this. Hopefully not. And I'm also hoping that the story is over in these, I guess, 11 chapters, because there isn't supposed to, or 12 chapters, because there isn't supposed to be an extra one, because again, they skipped one. Alright, we're done. I'm gonna continue with this next time. Yeah.